Bob Goff.
Hey, how you doing there?
Good. Thank you so much for joining me today. I asked Bob how he wanted me to introduce him, and he just said, say, hey, here's Bob. So here's Bob.
We don't need any titles, right?
There
Just
you
like
go.
Jesus called people like friend or brother or sister, or he gave them a nickname.
There you go. All right, Bob, what does genuine community look like for you?
I think it's a place where you do authenticity. Faith is a big deal for me. It's not for everybody. Wouldn't expect it to be. But I'm thinking about how the folks that were friends of Jesus early on got together. It says they broke bread together and they had things in common. I love that. And it wasn't just like pounding carbs. They were like really had things together. You know, you wouldn't want my car. It's got 100,000 miles. So you don't want to swap pink slips with me. But to just say that we have common experiences, common things. So it's not just similar ideologies or opinions. It's to share a couple experiences. And that's the part I want. That's what is the hallmark of really deep community, shared experiences with a ton of authenticity.
I love that answer. I think so much community becomes this vague, out there, ethereal theology kind of thing. And the way you're talking about it, like it's just tangible. It's everyday life, and that's so beautiful.
Yeah. It's not just identifying with similar principles or similar viewpoints or similar worldviews, but to actually experience something, go through something together, do something beautiful or hard or something even better that's directed to somebody else.
Yeah, yeah. What is it about that? Because it sounds ideal, sounds utopian, perhaps even. What is it that makes it so hard to actually find that kind of community?
You know what? It actually is out there. It's everywhere. So I think you just need to decide. I just came back from 3 days of doing that, where we just got a bunch of people together and said, let's just bend some time here and make 3 days feel like 3 weeks. And so that kind of intentionality with your time, not telling people what to do, but reminding people who they are, that's where all the good stuff happens. And then we get to discover the beauty in the other people. And it isn't just this squishy, unicorns and confetti thing, but to be sad about some stuff that are making people sad. And so creating, first of all, a safe place where people can do it so they can get as real or not as they'd like with no pressure. It doesn't feel artificial or contrived. And then setting aside the time to do it, to say this is going to happen. So I wouldn't expect, like talking to you from my garage, that it's going to happen here, but I could intentionally say, hey, next week I'm going to get together with this person at Starbucks or this person, make them pay. And that'll instantly create some community.
Sure. And other than them paying, does anything come to mind as far as whether from those 3 days or just in general, like a couple of favorite glimpses you've gotten to have, your favorite part of community?
Yeah, usually setting up the time to just say this is what it's going to be about. I remember in this last couple of days we decided at the beginning I was that we would just make a family out of ourselves. We're not trying to be the same, we're trying to be one. So that was the idea, one of the many that Jesus shared in John 17. He said, my goal, my hope is that they would be one. And so you don't need to be the same to be one. You just need to be present, like fully present. So the first thing we do is have people just say, like, I'm just here. And part of like what you're doing in focusing people on the beauty of community, it just gets people present. They're starting to think about these things. And then with a ton of intentionality and creatively, I think you're just inviting people into that. So that's it, just people deciding. And you think it doesn't involve anything other than deciding we're doing this thing.
Yeah, what a great first step. That is, you're right. That's part of why we are inviting folks into genuine community through this book is to move from this kind of facade. We have to stay removed. We can't be ourselves into what you even mentioned in the first answer, like authenticity, into vulnerability. That's hard, but there's something so beautiful.
I'm just so glad you've teed it up. Sometimes we mean to pay some attention to this, we just don't get around to it in the rush of life and all that. So there's no bad guy in this, but we get to move from saying we're a victim or we're a hero to say, you know what? I don't want to be a victim. I don't want to be a hero. I want to be a participant. And when you have people showing up with that, like palms up, then cool stuff happens.
Yeah, it's almost like the scriptures talk about rich and poor and male and female and just everybody. There's this great kind of not uniformity, but to your point, unity that
Yeah,
happens.
I had a really neat experience. It was a number of years ago in India. There was a little hut in the middle of the jungle, and they had two jars of rice in front. And I asked this person, like, what's the deal with these jars of rice in this really tiny little village? They said, well, this jar on the left is if you need some rice, you just take one handful, and that's enough to get you through the night. And I thought that was so beautiful. And I asked, well, what's the other jar for? And he said, well, that's if you have a handful of rice to give, you can put it in there. And so in community, and this would be something that you spend some time focusing on, is you take what you need, you give what you got. And so that kind of idea that there's no agenda, it isn't because you have to, it's just that you come with a heart ready to just take what you need. And that takes a little soul searching to say, what do I really need? I need greater friendships. I need to get real about something that happened in the past or something I'm afraid of in the future. So it's like identifying your need and then making that known to some safe people. And then also giving what you got to say you're not here just to extract from the community, but to participate.
Which is really the only venue for two things that you write and talk about a lot of joy and generosity. And it's almost impossible to find that level of joy. It is impossible to be generous in isolation.
Yeah, I don't think we need a more information about these things. I think we just need reminders. So, I'm grateful you have a book that's a reminder. Just say, like, yeah, because I don't think that there's probably anything they've written that's going to blow anybody's doors off. Like, oh my gosh, I've never, ever thought about that. I think what they'll do is they're going to see a familiar idea and a reminder of the importance of that idea. And they go, like, oh, yeah, I need to get back to that kind of Revelations 2. It says, like, my problem with you is that you've forgotten your first love. Like that first moment, like you touch knees with somebody on purpose and you're like, oh, because you're a thing. So I want to go return to that first love or a time that has felt like community worked or that moment. It's like the end of camp highlight reel of all the things that you did. What I want to do is create a couple more of those moments on purpose in community.
That's great. And talking about forgetting it and returning to something, last question. We're kind of, all in different places as we watch this, but coming out of a year of isolation, a year of division, this kind of stuff. What's your hope, Bob, for your community and then the more global community as we come out of this season of COVID and isolation?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between being invited somewhere and being welcomed. So there's a couple times, I don't know if this has happened to you, that I've been invited somewhere, but when then I got there, I realized I wasn't welcome. Like, we're so glad you're here. And so that might just be good judgment on their part. But maybe instead of inviting people to church, welcome them. Instead of avoiding the people that are difficult, realize those are the people Jesus engaged. I think I just flip it. So mature community is one that's always making the table bigger, always not just saying, hey, you're invited here, but that when somebody shows up that creeps you out a little bit, just say, like, hey, you are welcome here because I am coming here to learn, not to teach. And that kind of a heart for all of us is the one that will give us ultimately really noteworthy life. So I got my pen out most of the time. I'm like ready to like learn. So teach me something. So I'm so glad you've done the tedious work about writing. That's crazy. What an accomplishment. It's like every word is spelled differently, right?
Oh my goodness,
It's like,
absolutely. Yeah.
darn, just when you thought you had cat.
Right.
Nailed.
And that's why God made editors. And
Yes, exactly. Is this gray or gray?
exactly. Well,
EA. Yeah.
right. The writing process is a work in community in of itself. So
It
that's
kind of is. And, to the point, sticking with that metaphor, like that, there's tedious parts of community just hanging in there when it's rough, but to lift people's eyes towards the horizon, lift our own eyes, even when it's difficult to say, I value this, I'm not going to yield to it. People that are kind of, I'm not listening for the loudest voice, I'm listening for the truest voice. And so I just want to be the person. I got nothing to teach anybody, but I've got a ton to learn. And so I'm like, God, drops people in our path. And so I'm just so glad for this reminder to return to community.
well, thank you. Thank you for being that kind of person who shares stories and experiences and lifts many eyes to look towards something bigger. And thank you for your writing and your stories. And thank you for the time today, Bob. I'm really,
Oh, thanks, man. Great job with the book. I'm cheering for you.
thank you.